Welcome into Phil's Tax Hacks and Other Retirement Facts with CPA and personal financial specialist, Phil Putney. Now let's get rolling with today's show. Hey everybody, welcome into Phil's Tax Hacks and Other Retirement Facts with Phil Putney and myself back again. Getting into November. Actually, we're taping this on Halloween, so this is it the spooky version? I don't know.
The spooky version. We should wear our costumes today.
Right. I'll have Cameron put some spooky elements in the video.
Bats flying through or something.
Yeah, we'll do some random stuff like that. But we're going to talk about general planning and some investment strategies, things of that nature. Phil, kind of year-end stuff, right? So the year-end is starting
to the year-end.
Fourth quarter, right?
We're busy with that right now. So doing a lot of year-end planning with clients. And
yeah, exactly. So let's get into it. Let's have a conversation, and there's a lot to cover. So we'll just dive right in and just say Happy Halloween. You'll probably catch this after Halloween, but
after
either way,
Halloween, but
and welcome to November. So don't forget to turn your clocks back here in a couple of days.
I know. It's hard to believe.
I know. Yeah,
it's coming quick.
It's just funny because it was 85 yesterday here, and then it's 50 today for Halloween, and it's every year on Halloween it goes phew,
drops off
every year.
Well, we had that last week. I mean, it got up to mid 70s, and Tuesday I think it was 30. Yeah, hard frost overnight, and then it jumped into the mid 70s, and then the weekend dropped off in 40s and rain.
Hilarious.
It's like
my wife and I were laughing. We were like, every year, because the kid would be like, she's grown now, but every year she'd be like, why has it got to get cold? And it's like
Halloween. But
sometimes she would like it because it helped with her costume, and other times she didn't like it because she's like, it's too chilly to go out and do stuff. So, it's like, well, it could be worse. We could live back up north again. So, but anyway, let's jump in, get started. General planning, investment strategies, rebalancing, and risk. Thinking about end of the year as the focal point here. Rebalancing and risk. Talk to me about it.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good time of the year just to revisit, your risk tolerance.
Right.
Not necessarily based on what markets are doing today, but at least once a year to revisit, okay, am I still comfortable with what's going on?
Right.
Make sure you're looking at the accounts. What is the risk level? Is the risk positioned the right way? Again, how we're using it is more that bucket type strategy. So have the higher risk in that later bucket, soon bucket has, the lower risk type assets. So,
well, and let's bring in the world events to this equation as well, Phil. So people are starting to send messages. We're starting to get more, I talk to advisors all across the country, and it's the same kind of feeling everywhere. Hey, does this kind of all this activity, does that warrant, looking at things or changing things? And it's appropriate response, I think, for most people who just don't, who don't really think it through and who don't really do this every day like you do, because we see all this activity in the world and we think, maybe I should make some changes, but often it's not really the case, right?
Right. Yeah. I mean, you don't want to make those emotional changes. And that's why I say revisit it maybe once a year like this to confirm, is your risk tolerance, are you still good with this risk tolerance? Yeah. Especially as we have gone through some volatility, looked really good earlier in the year, but we've given back a lot of that gain, if not all of it on most of the indices. And who knows where we go from here with,
oil is a lot of it, right?
And a lot of other things going on.
Oil is definitely a lot of it because of obviously the Middle East stuff. So,
and unfortunately, oil touches everything. So,
it does. Okay, so just again, risk and rebalancing at the end of the year, certainly a good time.
It's always once a year revisit that just to make sure, hey, am I still good with the risk tolerance where we're at? Okay, just to make sure you're not getting caught by surprise when things do eventually run into a downturn, and you don't want to make the decision then, because that's the wrong time to make the decision that this isn't the risk I'm comfortable with. So
okay, all right, let's talk about maxing out the contributions. So if you are in a position to do so as the year's winding down, good idea.
Yeah, just again, look at your plan to figure out, what was I trying to do with the 401ks, IRAs, Roth, et cetera. Was I trying to max them out? And if I am I on track with that? If not, do I have room still to do that? Yeah. You've got a couple of months left in the year to get those contributions in.
Well, from a tax planning standpoint, this is helpful, yeah?
Oh, absolutely. It could be, depending on where the money goes. Okay. Roth, it doesn't give you that tax benefit, but there's other long-term tax benefits to it. Okay. Health savings account's a big one to consider. You're nearing the end of the year for that. Although with health savings accounts and IRAs, Roth IRAs, if it's a contribution, you can push them into the next year, so up to the tax due date for the current year. But it's always easier, at least I think, to have it in the year that it's for. It just creates more of a rhythm.
Oh, okay. I got you.
So
okay.
If you're making a 2023 contribution, I mean, technically, yeah, you can delay that until 2024, till the due date, April 15th. But it's probably a good idea to bring that into the current year and just have current year contributions be for that current year, versus you're always playing catch up then at that point. So,
all right, year's winding down. So harvesting, so tax loss harvesting, right? And RMDs.
Yep.
Good situation for people to start paying attention to, talking to their CPA about. And what is tax loss harvesting, by the way?
Yeah, so tax loss harvesting is really just looking at those non-retirement accounts, first of all. So it only applies to what we call non-qualified or non-retirement type accounts, your brokerage accounts. Anything, think of it this way, anything held outside of a retirement account, IRAs, 401ks, Roth IRAs, those type of accounts don't count. So there is no tax loss harvesting. But on those type of accounts, it could be, especially with, again, market volatility, if there are losses in the account on different holdings, it might make sense to go ahead and harvest those losses. So go ahead and sell, create the loss, and then repurchase something that isn't the same security. I mean, that's kind of the thing you got to watch for in tax loss harvesting is what they call the wash sale rule. So not to get too technical, but if you can't sell it, create a loss, and then just turn around and rebuy it the next day because the IRS says, well, your economic position didn't change. But there are ways around that with buying a security that isn't the same but very similar, at least for that holding period, and then maybe switching back. And it's just a means of not necessarily changing your allocation of what you're doing, but reaping some of these losses to either use to offset gains that you've had this year, or you start to build up this loss carryover that in years when there are gains, now you have these losses that can help offset it.
Yeah, and so your advisor should be probably talking to you about this anyway, right? As the years
Yeah, if you have those non-retirement accounts, just paying attention to that, does it make sense to do some tax loss harvesting? And then you mentioned RMDs. I mean, that's the time of the year we're again, part of our process with our clients as we get into this fourth quarter, we're looking at RMDs. If they haven't already taken it earlier in the year, a lot of clients will take it monthly, or they're already on a distribution pattern that's
trying to satisfy that number. Yeah.
But if not, I mean, it has to be done by the end of the year. This isn't something you can postpone until
and you're running out of time because that deadline is like quick.
Yeah, December 31st, it has to be out of the account. So, I mean,
but if you think about that, how many places are closing early and all this kind of stuff, right?
Right. Yeah. I mean, your custodian, the thing you have to find out from them is, okay, yeah, technically it's December 31st. But chances are you can't send them an RMD distribution form on the 29th or, the 30th and say, oh, I want this. Well, sorry, you're too late. They're way behind,
Yeah. And
everyone else had the same idea. Right. And they, they're trying to get it
they're
done,
closed for days around Christmas and around New Year's and all that stuff. So good idea to get it done, especially if you just turned 72, maybe sometime this year, and you haven't done one yet, right?
Well, so for this year, it's actually 73. So it was 72 last year. I know they goof around and they've changed it all the time. So this year is 73 now. So so if you turned 73 this year, just be conscious of that. You have to have an RMD. The one opportunity you have this year, if this is your first year of RMDs, is you can postpone first year's RMD till April 1st of next year. But it's a one-time deal. Next year, though, you have to take two because you have to take the 2023's RMD you postpone, and you have to take 2024's.
Yeah. So just make sure you got that plan if you decide to double up. Yeah.
Yeah. So if you didn't miss it for the first year, it's like, oh, I got a little bit of window, only 3 months basically to get it caught up in the first year.
But it's just that first time, and then after that, you're rolling.
Exactly.
And if you've already started your RMDs, then
you're on the path every year. You have to have it done by the end of the year. So and you don't want to miss it. We've talked about it plenty of times before, but it's one of those things. If you miss it, technically, there's a 50% penalty.
Yeah.
And you still have to take it anyway.
25 now.
And pay the tax. Or I'm sorry, 25. Yeah.
I missed one. You missed one. All right.
They keep changing these rules.
They do.
You can't keep up with them. So. Yeah, 25% penalty.
They were so sweet.
They lightened up on it a little bit.
They were sweet. They just dropped it down. Okay. Insurance and healthcare planning in the year conversation.
Yeah. So, if you're on Medicare, you're probably already in the middle of that discussion right now.
Open enrollment's going on. Right?
Yeah, the annual election period, they call it, where if you're on a prescription drug plan or an Advantage plan, you can start making changes in those plans for next year. So it's probably on your mind, already on your target, your radar right now. In fact, for all our clients, my son-in-law Brand is in the midst of that with them and running through those options. Do they need to make a plan change for the coming year? if you're not in Medicare, even if you're currently employed still, or have company type coverage, it's probably the time of the year they're opening up that again for you for next year. So just reanalyze it. Do I need to make a change? Is there a new option available? Should I go to a high saving, a high deductible plan with a health savings account? I mean, just again, it's always a good thing to reanalyze it to see, okay, what are the options I have this year? Is there something I should be adjusting?
Yeah. And with those HSAs, man, they can, those high numbers are high, but it may be worth it.
Right. It's one of those things that, HSAs are, I think, often an overlooked tax benefit. It's
true.
To me, a great vehicle to be able to fund. And if you can pay for the out-of-pocket medical just out of your normal budget anyways, and start building up that HSA for basically a medical retirement expense account, because it's tax-free at any point in the future. So
yeah, for sure.
And we've talked a lot of times about HSAs, and but there's a lot of things you can do with it. So it's definitely, if you have the opportunity to have a high deductible plan with an HSA, consider it. Can be a little, scary up front if you look at the high deductibles. It's at the end of the day, you're paying somebody, right? You're either paying a higher premium for these low deductibles and, high coverages, or you're going to pay a little bit lower premium, maybe a lot of times substantially lower, to have more exposure, but usually if you start to add up the math, the exposure is there. But if you've had even a couple of years where you really didn't meet those high deductibles with medical expenses, you're ahead of the game. So again, just run through the math, and make sure that it still makes sense to be on the plan you're at today. So,
okay. Well, you mentioned budgeting a minute ago, so let's talk about maybe one that's a little more, I guess people feel like it's a little more in their daily control versus some of these other things. And some of these other things, they feel like, hey, I need to talk to my advisor, I need to talk to my CPA, and we'll work together on this. But, income and lifestyle, right? So years winding down, it's easy to start getting to the holiday mode where we start thinking about, what are we getting for, the kids and the grandkids, or this, that, and the other. I mean, let's just be even realistic here, Phil. I mean, food prices are still pretty dang out of control in a lot of places. Like Thanksgiving dinner is expensive, right? I mean, all this stuff. So are you making some, are you adjusting? Are you do you feeling like you have to kind of scale back your fourth quarter lifestyle, if you will, because of everything that's still happening in the world? So having that plan, having that strategy, working with an advisor, is going to help you feel a little bit more better about the situation you're in.
Yeah, it's always a good idea to revisit that spending plan, at least, again, once a year, especially in light of inflation.
Yeah.
So hopefully when you built the plan out, you did build in some kind of inflation, probably not at the level that we've experienced. And I wouldn't expect that. We don't.
Right.
When we're building on a plan, don't build at that level. Because
19% for food? Come on. You didn't plan for that, Phil?
Right. It doesn't average out to that over, retirement. But again, it does have some ebbs and flows. You've got to make sure, hey, are we still on track? Do we need to maybe make some adjustments according to this?
Yeah.
Definitely something, even if you're not making adjustments this year, pay attention to it. Where is it going from, next year to the following year? And maybe at some point you do need to make some adjustments. But it's always a good idea once a year just to revisit, hey, we planned on spending X, and, don't necessarily need to get into the whole detailed budget of, well, this amount went to food and, whatever. But you planned on spending X amount, and did you spend that? Did you spend more? Did you spend less? Why? Is it inflation? Okay, well, that's something that we got to monitor and make sure we're not, it does come down at some point in the future. But I mean, if it's because maybe you underestimated, maybe this is your first year in retirement, right? And you were thinking, I only needed, $70,000 a year net spendable income.
And that's a doozy if it is, right?
Now you're there. It's like, I really spent like 80, almost 90. Well, okay, maybe you got to revisit that plan again and say, hey, we underestimated this. We really need to look at this again. So
that's a great point, because, if it is your first year in retirement, and we'll get a little away from the notes here on this for a minute, but that's a huge thing for a lot of folks. Absolutely. Is the struggle of the first year period, let alone a rocky, tumultuous year, right?
Yeah.
Inflation's high, markets wonky.
Not doing good. Yeah. I mean, it's been a crazy, if this is your first year, kind of a crazy first year of retirement.
And it can hurt. It can punch you pretty hard.
Right. And I mean, so it can go both ways. I mean,
true.
If it is your first year and things have gone kind of sideways like this, I mean, don't panic and think, we've got to stop spending. We can't do anything.
Right.
I'm just saying, look at it, right? Make sure you're still on track and it's all good. Right.
Yeah. End of the year, review this stuff.
Yeah, you might need to make some adjustments.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, especially if you jumped out, like Phil, like if you retired in March or April, right? You know, and while you're thinking, okay, I'm going to see my advisor again come March or April of 24, maybe it's worthwhile to talk to him again here at the end of the year, right? That kind of thing, especially if it's your first year. Hopefully, maybe depending on your situation, you've already laid out expectations and a plan for when to talk.
Yeah, I was going to say, and the big key with all of this is the assumption of, you've already had that discussion and laid the plan out. This is a review. Hopefully. Are we on track? If not, it's a good time to have that plan.
Right.
You know, no better day than today. If you haven't done it already, have a plan, because things are going to happen. I mean, it's you know, the world we live in.
Yeah, for sure.
It's not going to be this linear type retirement where inflation's at 2% and growth is at, whatever it is. I mean, it just doesn't happen that way year in and year out. So
okay. So let's talk about a few other items here for the end of the year conversation pieces that you may need to have. So again, if you're thinking about getting close or getting into retirement, getting right there, is real estate and relocation on your particular conversation piece? Interest rates in the housing market may change your mind on that right now. It's not exactly super favorable, but there still are some situations out there, Phil, where maybe if the house is paid off, if you're in a good situation where the current home you're already in is completely paid for, and you do want to downsize, then you might be able to actually kind of, sell and get ahead and sock a little bit of money into the retirement accounts. Possible. A little tougher right now, but possible.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's part of reviewing that plan. So, I mean, hopefully you've had that discussion already, that if relocation is part of the plan, or how close are you to that point? Does it need to change based on what's going on in markets today? Interest rate it's a tough thing right now, especially for new home buyers first entering, because, they're starting from scratch and getting hit with this huge interest rate. And, probably don't have the equity to roll in like maybe somebody that already has a house, so that mortgage is a little bit lower. But I mean, I always say don't get too caught up in the interest rate, at least my personal opinion, because it's something that changes. Yeah. Just like inflation, right? I mean, it moves in cycles, looking
still
back
maybe
historically.
Get going and in a couple of years refi if things got better.
Absolutely. Just keep it in mind. And if you look back historically, I mean, these interest rates we've seen today, it's not like we've never seen them before. They've been there before. They've been higher than they are today before. Doesn't last forever. You do have the opportunity at some point to be able to refinance and make it work later on. So again, don't write it off completely. Reanalyze it to see, is there a great opportunity today? Should I do it? Am I getting forced to do it? Is there a relocation because of position of, change of position?
You got to factor it in and think. And if it's not on the bucket, hey, great. Then that's just one less thing for you to deal with. But if it's certainly something there, start looking through all the different possible scenarios, because it's just different right this minute. I mean, right now, you think, God, I wish I'd have jumped on the 2.75 or the 3% a year ago. But, it is what it is, right? So you got to have to deal with what. Although you were talking about, it's not certainly the highest we've seen at 7 or 8%, which is where it's at right about now. Today, if my dad was alive, I could see him going, 8? That sounds great. I remember in the 80s, I was 14, paying money. Yeah. So be like, okay, it's all perspective, but still,
it is. It's all relative to where you're at. But okay. It's definitely worth the discussion to revisit to see, does it still make sense? Yeah. Can we push it a year or two to kind of wait this out and see what happens? So, okay,
let's do a couple quick fast ones here, a little more rapid fire. Fraud and cybersecurity. Be careful. Year's winding down. Lots of scams and stuff coming out of the freaking woodwork. So be real careful with that stuff.
It's getting more and more common. That whole phishing.
And sophisticated.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, it's crazy. Just pay attention to, especially around the holidays, make sure that person asking for a donation is really the person or the charity it's not some,
And don't just say yes or no on the phone, folks, when people call you. I know we talked about this a couple of weeks ago, but just say, I can hear you. If they're like, can you hear me? Just say, I can hear you, right?
Yes.
Because if they keep asking you that question, they're trying to get you to say yes so they can use your voice to say that you accepted something or whatever. So just be real careful and maybe change, maybe keep an eye on your passwords. Make sure that when a charge comes through or something, especially it's holiday season, right?
Oh, yeah.
Go back and look at it. Make sure it's accurate. Make sure it's correct, all that stuff. Do a little bit of extra due diligence through this time of the year. I mean, it's probably a good idea all year long, but certainly this time.
I mean, we're busy. People know that. So, I mean, they're, a great time of year for them to kind of try to slip in under the cracks. Yep.
Yeah, exactly. So. Gifting to heirs and charity. So end of the year is winding down. Again, another big thing to do.
Yep, same thing. If that's part of your planning process, look at gifting. This year you can do up to the $17,000 in gift without having to report it.
And this can be for anybody, right?
This is for anyone, right? It doesn't have to
so
be
if you have a favorite podcast host,
there you go.
Just saying. But it is the board, so it's per person, right? So you and the spouse,
right? One person to the other person. So a husband and wife giving to a married child. I mean, they can technically do 4 times that because the husband does both the child and the wife, child and spouse, and the mom does the same. So I mean, it's you can get 4 times that basically.
Okay,
if you're comfortable giving it to that person. So So
donor advised funds. What is that?
So charity, donor advised funds, a great thing to consider. So especially when you're looking at it from a tax standpoint. So donor advised fund is in and of itself a charitable entity, right? Okay. So the idea with a donor advised fund is you give a larger contribution today, getting that tax deduction. So the benefit gets you above the hurdle. So most people, if they're giving a kind of a standard, maybe a lower charitable amount, that added with property taxes and interest on the house, I mean, you're not getting above your standard deduction today of $30,000, let's call it. So one way around that is if you donate to a donor advised fund, it's a large donation in 1 year, get you way above that hurdle. So you get the benefit. Then in the future, you don't make donations from that charitable entity, that donor advised fund. So you still control it, how it's invested, when the money gets given to a charity. The downside to it is you can't take it back, right? So you put in 30, 50, 100,000 into a donor advised fund. It is
an emergency. Emergency comes up and you want it back.
You can never get it back. You're not a charity, right? Yeah. So you control it. You can control when and who gets it, but it doesn't come back to you, or it doesn't come back to an heir either. They can control it if you pass. So they're great vehicles, but it's like anything. It's one of those things. Does it fit with my scenario? Am I charitably inclined?
I'm assuming that the tax consequence side is to be beneficial for the person.
It's a huge advantage, right? Yeah. So that's really the reason to do it, is getting that big tax benefit
and being charitable minded.
I was going to say you have to be charitably minded and inclined to begin with. If you are, donor advised funds can be a good vehicle because you get this large donation up front, take the tax deduction. We use it a lot in scenarios with Roth conversions because now we get a significant deduction in a year that we can then pair with a Roth conversion. Mm-hmm. If you have, and this is, you might not have now, but appreciated securities, right? So value of the securities that you own have gone up versus what you paid for them. You can donate those to a donor advised fund, or
so you can donate a stock.
Right. So you own an individual stock that you paid, let's say $10 a share for, and it's worth 20 today. Well, if you donate that share to the donor advised fund, or directly to a charity for that matter, you get a donation of the $20, the current fair value. So you don't have to pay the tax on the gain. So it's just a kind of a double win. You avoid the tax and you get a higher donation. So, but anyways, there's a kind of going down a rabbit hole.
Yeah, a lot of nuance, but it's certainly something. A lot
of nuances, right?
Yeah, because some people are familiar with. Probably quite a few are familiar with QCDs because we talk about that often.
Yep. So charity, that's another thing to look at, is if you are charitably inclined and you're of RMD age, although again, this is one of those crazy nuances they built in that it used to be 70 and a half, which was RMD age. Well, they hard coded 70 and a half. So now that RMD age is 73,
you can start it
QCDs
early.
Still start at 70 and a half.
Yeah.
So
does that retro? You could. Does that retro work, Phil? So like, okay, so if your RMDs aren't required till 73, and you're 71, and you want to do a QCD because you're charitably minded, right? And you're over the 70 and a half, so you can go ahead and send money straight to it. Does it backdate at all to that first RMD, or no? Has it got to be in the same calendar year?
Well, it's
for that.
It's just a hard 70 and a half. So once you are 70 and a half,
right. You're just eligible.
In any year you're eligible.
Yeah.
You can donate up to $100,000 out of your IRA to a charity as a qualified charitable distribution.
Yeah, I didn't know if you could start like prepaying on your RMDs, so to speak.
No, no. So if you do that, it's not like, well, I'm banking. I've already taken all these RMDs by the time I hit 73 or 75.
Right.
Well, I took 200,000 in these prior years.
That's exactly what I was wondering. Yeah, from like let's say for 70, because I'll be 75. I think you and I both will be in the 75 75 category. So it's like, because if they change that, if they keep that in place the way they're doing it, it's like, hey, from 71 to 74, let's say we give money each year, you know, is that building a bank that we can then apply from, you know, into 7? No, it didn't work that way, huh?
Nope, sorry.
That doesn't hurt to
work
ask.
that way. Yeah,
Never hurts
it's worth a try. You know?
That's right. That's right. All right. Well, final one. I know we're gone a little long. We'll wrap it up real quick on this. End of the year. Also, good time just to remember to update your documents, beneficiary designation, stuff like that.
Yeah, you should be doing it once a year anyway. So if you're looking at all these other things, review beneficiary designations. Is, you know, has anything changed in your life? Has there been births? Has it, you know, people passed away? You know, has that, you know, one nephew ticked you off and you don't want him on the list anymore, so you're going to take him, or whatever it is, right? So just
Brandon.
make sure that, that's right.
Looking at you, Brandon. We're making him the occasional bunt of the joke, so Brandon's a good dude. Don't get us wrong.
Yeah, no, he's a great dude. So. But just make sure you're still on target, right? That nothing's changed and everything is going to happen the way you want it to happen if that unfortunate event takes place. So.
Yeah. And again, just it's an easy, quick one here as we wrap it up. So bunch of stuff here on this podcast, obviously, to think about as the year winds down. And we'll have some information in the show notes as well. You can kind of look through that, but just make sure that it's something that you're talking with your advisor about. And again, I think it's a really good point to mention if it is your first year in retirement, or even maybe in just your second year, and you don't really have all the kinks worked out and you're not kind of in that rhythm or groove, reach out to your advisor and have a conversation with them. Just make sure things are groovy as the year winds down. And of course, if you need help and you don't have a plan, or you don't have an advisor, or you're already working with Phil, but you just need to talk to him, or whatever the case is, make sure you reach out to him, because the year is closing fast, right? So time does get
you're running out of daylight, so to speak.
Running out of daylight. That's right. So philstaxhacks.com. It's where you can check out the podcast in its various forms, and audio and video as well. Google's now switching everything to YouTube. They're merging all their stuff once again, but Apple, Spotify, YouTube will be in both audio and video forms on there as well. Again, philstaxhacks.com, or just call him at 248-888-7530. That's going to do it for this week, Phil. Thanks, buddy.
All right, take care.
I always appreciate you. I'll see you next time here on Phil's Tax Hacks and other retirement facts. A happy Halloween. Bye. Phil?
Investment advisory services offered through AFS Wealth Management. The content of this program is provided for informational purposes only and is not a solicitation or recommendation of any investment strategy. Investments and/or investment strategies involve risk, including the possible loss of principal. There is no assurance that any investment strategy will achieve its objectives.